If you're bilingual, what language do you think and dream in? Seriously, please like and subscribe, and comment something nice for your favorite Reddit slave. I grew up with only speaking German. But when I read and speak a lot of English, then I also start thinking in English. And to be honest, English sounds much better than German. Usually my first language. But I hear that it can change if you use the second language enough. I have two separate dreams in separate languages that I flip between at my leisure. Mostly English, although sometimes when I have dreams about my dad or my sisters they speak some kind of Hungarian infused Creole. I often forget which language I was just using, but I mostly think in the language relevant to the subject at hand. For instance, if I'm reading a book in English, I tend to think in English. I believe I use English more frequently than my native language most of the time. So in general, I think and talk to myself in English. In fact, it feels more natural to think in English now that I'm consciously switching between languages to test. But this may be because this comment is in English. Dreams seem to happen, not in a specific language, but in wordless ideas. Similar to what I suspect telepathy would be like. Either that or I don't remember the language. Which may be a sign dreams are in a language, so ingrained into my subconscious I don't even notice it. This may be a sign I dream in my native language. But that is conjecture. I don't feel like English is a different language anymore. More like an extension. So it is quite likely I switch between at least English and my native language when I dream. Sometimes I have dreams where I'm clearly speaking in English, but it often reflects a context where I become self-conscious I'm not a native speaker, e.g., if I'm talking to a native in the dream. Depends. Sometimes, I dream with all of the languages, but just as in reality, I mainly use English. Both. Easy. English and Spanish. I speak American English, I think in ASL, and I dream in Scottish English. I'm polyglot. 4+ languages, and my dreams I never speak in specific one, but others speak on the language I'm used to talk to them. It's odd. Also very common I start thinking in one language and translating to other at random, and then confusing terms. The language of time, of magic, of the void. I dream in the ancient language, the language spoken before any knew what language was. The beating of a god's heart gave it its rhythm. The screaming of the first children its pitch. The silence of the empty darkness between stars gave it its gravity. When I wake, a single syllable of that speech can unmake reality. I grew up speaking Turkish and then German. Since I live in Germany and lastly I learned English, but despite that I mostly think in English. As for my dreams, I don't remember most of them, and in the ones I do remember no one spoke, so I can't really answer that question. Both English and Spanish. Both. I switch between then languages. English because I use it more. Dream in Dutch. Think in English. Mostly English these days, but some words in my home language. Usually my first language. But if I've been immersed in the second a lot before going to bed, I also dream in that. I actually dreamed in French the night before I had my first French lesson at school. It depends on my day. If I won in school, I would think in Hungarian. But at weekends when nobody speaks to me, I think in English. English is my second language. Nobody wants to learn Hungarian. It is really hard. It really depends on what language I have been speaking that day, but I often dream about forgetting how to speak one of the languages. English. I only knew Polish till kindergarten, at which point I choppily engaged in the English language. I speak fluent Polish to people that understand it if I've spoken it recently, but you think in what language you're mainly using in your current circumstances. Sucks visiting Poland for a month. Coming back and starting sentences in Polish to your peers' dismay for a week, only stopping when you see from the person's expression it's just gibberish. I'd like to speak Japanese. I actually speak English and Spanish. And Japanese is because of my wife. She speak Germany, Spanish, Italian, English and Japanese. This is because her grandparents are Germans. His father is Italian and his mother Japanese. She lives in Bolivia with me. A Russian guy who doesn't speak Russian. I dream in whatever language fits the setting of my dream. Not gonna show up all Aussie when I'm talking to an all Filipino cast in my dreams. Native Portuguese speaker. English had always been my second language until I came to work in France. All my entertainment, a lot of my college reading material and most of professional resources are in English. So I often think in English, but my wife says she's heard me speak in all 3 languages during sleep. To be honest, I was very taken aback by that revelation. I use both interchangeably, though I do talk like that to some of my friends who also know the languages, so might be a factor. Not bilingual, but a friend of mine told me that her first dream in English is what made her feel like she was a fluent. Her dreams now switch back and forth. I speak many languages, but most of my dreams are in English.